The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by TIAA. TIAA makes you a retirement promise, a promise of a guaranteed retirement paycheck for life. Learn more at TIAA.org/promises pay off.
LinkedIn presents.
Hi, it's Maura Aarons-Mele, host of The Anxious Achiever. Today, I bring you, I get this question a lot, where my friend and colleague and leading executive coach, Nihar Chaya, and I hash out a question that we hear a lot from the people that we work with. Today, we're going to talk about how to know if it's time to leave your job and go out on your own. This is a question that understandably is on a lot of people's minds. And I think it's really important to layer over an angle about mental health and also how maybe your particular anxieties play out both in the idea of keeping a job and trying to be an entrepreneur. I hope it's helpful, and please let me know what you think of these more conversational LinkedIn Lives. Hello.
Hi, Maura.
I think I hear birds. Do I hear birds? When you came onto the stream, I thought I heard birds chirping. It was so lovely.
There might be. That's on my window, but
It was so lovely. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing? It's good to see you. I'm glad we're able to do this again and get back together.
I know. It's such a fun experiment. It's going to be our summer experiment. Every other week, we're going to do one of these, and we're going to put them on the podcast feed every other week. And the question that I thought I would bring today, that I get a lot, is what I'm calling, should I stay or should I go? And this is a question I bet you get a lot, which is, should I leave my job? And I want to throw another little spin on it that a friend of mine brought up, who got laid off from her senior level job after many years at the job. And her question was even, should I have left sooner? Did I make a mistake? Did I get complacent by not leaving? So let's talk about how you know when it's time to go.
Yeah, it's a lot of variables in that, in that question. I know that you and I both had the experience that we can share about having left corporate world and to start our own thing. I was giving this topic a lot of thought, and I think the way I framed it for myself was to think about, are you running away from something or running to something? And for me, I think there were times when I would love to kind of run away from a difficult work environment at, working for a boss or working for a big company. But I didn't really necessarily feel prepared to start on my own, because I wasn't sure that, I needed to actually have some experience and some social proof that would really make some sense out there in the market. And that's a really important lesson, I think, for anybody who's trying to start an entrepreneurial career in general. Like, just be aware of the competition out there for any industry you're in. And then when it comes to running to something, I think it's really getting in touch with kind of what interests you and maybe how do you use that experience to create your own kind of brand or your own service. But for me, I think it was really knowing that I had financially the runway in place, or at least the familial structure that was going to support the fact that this is going to take a few years to ramp up. And I think, I never say that you need to have it all figured out. Like, I definitely didn't know whether I was going to be successful as a coach, but I did talk to folks that were a few steps ahead of me and really understanding kind of like, how did they do it? And, I remember the first piece of advice I got from a few coaches that I worked with before. They said, it's going to take at least 3 years before you really feel confident here. And whether that was true or not, I didn't know, but I definitely was like, okay, I need to really get my expectations in line, that it is not going to happen overnight. And you need to be prepared for this to be a pretty long process.
I know. What I'm hearing from you is the importance of planning, the importance of some market research, and the importance of setting the expectations for yourself and others around you that, like, I'm probably not going to be an overnight success. And we need to be okay with that, you know?
Yeah. I think also just being able to prepare for you internally that, what does success look like? I remember one of my friends whose wife had actually started her own communications company told me that you really have to redefine what success and failure, quote unquote, looks like. Because when you're working for a 9 to 5, or obviously more than a 9 to 5, but like a salary job, even the bad days or the days where you're not really doing as much contribution are still considered successful. You're not really thinking much about them, as like a failure in the grand scheme of things. But it could feel like you're a failure if you're not able to pay the bills on your own, or pay, for me, the big thing was insurance costs. That was like a big shock for me. I remember talking to my accountant the first time I had to file my taxes on my own. And I was like, what's self-employment tax? I had no idea that there was this thing that was on top of the income tax, right?
That's the first thing I tell anybody who is going to be a self-employed person, whether it's just you, whether you want to start a business. Don't forget to save for taxes. It is the biggest pitfall. Alyssa has just listed a great question. And this is a reminder that if you're watching or listening, please put your questions up. We will try our best to answer them. I love this question. And this is exactly what I am dealing with this week, Alyssa, and what I wrote my newsletter about with a little different spin. How do you prepare yourself for the length of that process in the face of so much, quote, I was instantly successful posturing on social media? Right. You feel like you're the only one who's taking 3 years to scale up, and everybody else is already got 5-star clients and on their TED
Oh
Talk.
yeah. Oh yeah, man. That is a constant struggle because, I think social media in general, you're just going to always find somebody that it seems like their success has been overnight, or they really are successful, but you don't really understand kind of what went into it to get there. Um, do you have a perspective on that? I definitely am curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I wrote a newsletter this week. I interviewed Dr. Michael Freeman on my podcast, who's a famous psychiatrist at UCSF, um, and studies entrepreneurs and mental health. And the framing that he puts forward is that most entrepreneurs make less money, have less retirement security, take less vacation, have fewer hobbies, have far more work-life conflict. Like, his positioning is like, who in their right mind would become an entrepreneur? Is being on your own, especially in the US where we have no social safety net, a lapse in judgment?
Mm,
And yet, of course, so many of us who do our own thing feel like it was really the only choice for us, like to do what we wanted to do, to take care of ourselves, to be the people we wanted to be, and to create. We had to be entrepreneurs. And I definitely feel like I am that person. I left corporate America when I was 30, and I've been on my own since then. So almost 17 years. And I look extremely successful as an entrepreneur. This was a very vulnerable newsletter for me to write because I felt like I was admitting failure in the newsletter, because basically what I said is, I am a successful entrepreneur. I've built and sold a company. I, have published 2 books. I have a really popular podcast. I get paid speaking. Like, I'm successful. And yet it is still a struggle for me. It is still a hustle. And I'm really tired, and I'm really, really anxious. And I'm beginning to question, like, what is all this anxiety worth it? Would it be better to get a paycheck for once? And so, Alyssa, I feel very much trapped because I I have created a whole brand around, oh, doing your own thing is so great. And it is, but it's also exhausting. And the hustle doesn't stop. Even my most successful leadership thought leader friends, who are at the top tier in terms of what they can charge per hour, in terms of speeches, whatever, they still hustle,
yeah.
right?
Hmm. It never ends. Yeah.
I don't think it ever ends.
And it's interesting because I don't know if you would agree, but like when you are actually succeeding and getting those highs, such as like the fact that you were able to be the one that landed that client, or you were able to really take a client from, point A to point B, that the reward is something I've never experienced before in the corporate world.
Amazing.
It's amazing. It is
Amazing.
completely the kind of self-efficacy that we're looking for, Maslow's hierarchy. It's like, I finally have reached that, point. But with that comes definitely you have to go out there and hunt, and you have to go out there and build and that business yourself. You can't sit around and just wait for it to come to you. And I would say also, like, sometimes many of us who are solopreneurs, there can also be the feeling that, like, am I really an entrepreneur? I mean, I'm kind of just a consultant, I'm really like a contractor, or I'm a freelancer, and so and I don't generally feel that way, because I know part of me never really wanted to be a CEO of a company, but I know that there are people that oftentimes in the coaching world do feel that as well. Like, am I really an entrepreneur? Because I don't really have a team. I don't really have a business or a kind of a repeatable product. But I think the idea of hustling and also wondering if I'm keeping up with the competition is always going to be a part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I want to come back to the freelancer, solopreneur versus entrepreneur. But Alyssa, one of the things I want to say, and I absolutely know this to be true, is two things. One, social media is designed to make us feel bad and create FOMO and envy and jealousy. And the second is, the people who we all think their life is a bed of roses, it's not. And they, one of the things that social media allows you to do very effectively is to look what I call fake rich.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, it is and look, that's good. That's a skill you need when you're on your own. You got to cultivate the aspiration. You got to cultivate the sense of, wow, if I worked with Nihar, my life would be awesome, just like Nihar's life is awesome.
All right.
But the rest of us then sort of, like, we drink the Kool-Aid too. And we're all like, oh man, why am I not like Nihar? When the truth is, we don't know. We don't know.
No, exactly. Yeah. Such a great point, and I think also as it relates to the coaching world, the consulting world, especially when you're like, your brand, it's a whole different story, because I am selling in some respects myself. I'm not selling, a product from a consulting firm. And so the self-promotion piece is almost a necessary part of that. And I don't like that part necessarily. It's not my favorite part to do. I had to learn how to kind of be okay with the bragging and stuff like that, in a nice way. But we also are consumers of the social media too. And I see the kinds of profiles that I also would be like, I don't really know if that's something that I would compare myself to, or, wow, that's something I really want to get to. It's just an interesting kind of dynamic we're all in, where, if you really want to be an entrepreneur and start your own thing, you have to almost be willing to play that game a little bit, because people are kind of buying you as opposed to just the service you have.
People are, absolutely. Amy, yes, everyone is fake rich. Okay, but I have a question for you. Is the sort of self-promotion and building the allure that we do as people who earn our own money, or sorry, hunt what we kill, whatever you want to say, that different than building a corporate reputation and cultivating your own allure and reputation within an organization?
Yeah. So I had this personally experienced where I had to decide when I was working internally, did I want to start building any kind of social proof or visibility while I was there? Back when I was in that world, I think there was a lot less understanding of the need to get out there and build your brand, or maybe even a little bit less acceptance.
Oh yeah.
A lot of companies were like, I remember my company was like, you can't even have a LinkedIn. You can have a LinkedIn profile, but you can't have any recommendations from people. They were really big on, like, we're not having you become this this kind of side hustle type of thing. But there's other companies now, in particular, I think, as companies are realizing that people want more in their work life than just one company, I think there might be a little bit more allowance of, those kinds of things. As it relates to building your brand internally, what I do tell people, a lot of my clients is, you know, nowadays everybody's Googling each other. Everybody's checking on LinkedIn. Everybody is going to look you up before they meet you. You have to decide how much to own that narrative. And so even if you're going to be in the company forever, I think it's important for you to still have a digital footprint that people can say, oh, okay, this is how I think about this person. This is how I feel when I read about them. And so if you want to show that you are competent in a certain industry, or that you are very, very well read, or have a really big interest in a certain type of, domain, start being aware of that, because people are looking you up. And what's also interesting, Maura, is that a lot of folks that I find who do get to the place where they want to leave their company, they realize it's too late now to build a digital footprint, because they were so focused on their own internal network. It's like, I have so many people that are saying, I've never even checked my LinkedIn profile in like years, because I don't really need to. I've been working here. But now all of a sudden they're thinking, oh, I want to look around. I want to meet some search firms and stuff like that. Well, they don't know who you are, because you have nothing there yet. So I think it's a useful exercise to work internally, be loyal to your company, but don't kind of avoid the idea of kind of like digging your well before you're thirsty. Get out there and create that connection that might pay off later.
I love that. Digging your well before you're thirsty. I think so. But I also think the art of building personal relationships and stakeholders that you would have internally as a successful person is the most valuable skill that you're going to need to build your business, whether it's a pipeline of clients, whether it's you're creating a product, whether you're opening a restaurant, so I think that there are probably a lot more transferable skills than we think when you have been successful negotiating. I mean, for me, with my anxiety, I think I realized very early on at a young age that the office politicking was a bigger. There are two things set off my anxiety more than the fear of not having any money. One was, as we talked about last week, lack of autonomy. I have no control over my time or where I am or what I do. The second was constant human relationship negotiation in a corporate structure, which every organization has. And I don't know, for some reason with my anxiety profile, that was too much. Like for many years, as I wrote in my newsletter, the notion that I might not have a steady paycheck, that anxiety bothered me far less. Yeah, I think that.
What do you mean more about the negotiation? Like, so in other words, fitting in and kind of knowing that you were going to know how you were received by people in relationships?
Right.
Yeah.
Image management or presentation management, executive presence, building allies and coalitions, keeping my juice. Oh my God. I had a really hard time keeping my influence. And this happens. You get hired, you come in with power, but you slowly see it getting sucked away and people layer over you.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so I would completely resonate with that. The anxiety of the politics and the relationship building and really kind of maintaining those relationships as things change. Yeah. Was to me one of the most, troublesome dilemmas of work life, particularly if you're trying to move up. And I think just even on a numbers basis, it's so challenging because as you move up, there's less roles above you. As you get older, there's way more younger people coming in. That's why you have so many people stuck in the middle of middle management. And a lot of people, I think, when they think about this idea of like, should I go out on my own? A lot of it is coming from that place of just that angst where I'm stuck in the middle. I don't really have the excitement and the motivation I had when I was early career, but I also have not gotten the C-level thing that I'm been shooting for yet. And so what does this mean for me when I turn 50, 55 years old? Can I say anything about my career that I could be proud of, or that's going to be really kind of transferable? And so, yeah, it's very anxiety inducing. I totally agree with that.
But does that anxiety and that angst mean that you should go do your own thing? Like, how do you counsel people to evaluate what that angst, what is that angst telling me?
Yeah. So I think, I generally will say all these things are saying something. There's a lesson to be learned. So as you and I have talked about, so much of this is about hiking up our self awareness. And I believe that, anxiety and all these kinds of triggers are they're fear inducing, but they also can be real great teachers if you're able to sit with it. And so for me, like, I definitely recognize that I got to a heightened sense of anxiety just about the time I decided to leave and start my own company. It got to that place where I'm pretty sure now that, I've seen the pattern enough times that I don't know that I'm going to ever enjoy working for a boss. And again, let me also say to a lot of people, this was after 20 years of working for bosses. So, I really did get to a place of now I think I know how people do this. I definitely would not have known that 10 years into my career. I don't think anybody would have taken me seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it also helped that I worked at a few consulting firms where you worked in a bigger company where you were an external provider already to those clients. So I saw how that was done from a consulting perspective. But I think when the anxiety got so bad, I guess, or heightened enough, that was when I said, this is the time I need to start harnessing this towards something productive, as opposed to constantly banging my head against the same old thing, because I've done this enough times to know it's probably not going to change.
That's interesting. And if you're listening out there and you have a question, please pop it in for us. Yeah, I think that for me, when I talk to people who are feeling that angst, that itchiness, all the existential questions, and also I think right now the fear that I could get laid off anytime. Like, should I make the first move? It's hard to say, well, yes, entrepreneurship is definitely the answer to all this. It's not that easy.
Right. Right. So that is a great point also. Companies, it always fascinates me how many of us, we're conditioned to be loyal to our companies. We're conditioned to really do our best for them. And we should. But they don't think about you when you're gone. You know, they're quick on to the next one. I always, we might've talked about this, but it always makes me laugh when people say we're a family, come on, we're the so-and-so corporation family. It's like, yeah, but I mean, tomorrow, literally somebody's going to leave or be let go, and you're going to move on to the next one. And so I think it's important to recognize that as you get older, and even if you're successful, like, I mean, let's face it, a lot of people who are already in the C-suite might not get the CEO job, and it's time for you to also think about, like, are you comfortable being in that C-suite forever? Which is great. You're financially rewarded well. But maybe on a personal basis, you might say, I'm always going to feel like I'm number two and I don't enjoy that. I want to see if I could get the top job somewhere else. I think it is very important to think about, should I get ahead of something that could be out of my control, such as being let go or being kind of passed over for a promotion, and really have those options in front of you. And I oftentimes believe that just having options is a really healthy way of approaching things. You don't have to necessarily jump into that next option. And, everything might, on one day you might say, I'm going to get the hell out of here. And the next day you might be like, oh, I'm so happy I'm going to stay. But I think the better idea is to know that you do have a few options in front of you. And so you might say, hey, let me dabble in talking to other entrepreneurs. Let me increase my network as it relates to internally. One thing I'll tell you, to your point, which I loved about the value of having relationships internally. A lot of my first clients when I became an entrepreneur were from colleagues that I had internally.
100%.
Right. So I think really developing those friendships and relationships is so important. Don't get into that mindset of like, I'm out of here. I'm not going to deal with these people anymore. Right. Those are the folks that actually will bring you in to different companies as you get started.
Right. Those are the loose ties that you need to keep in your network. I mean, I think for me, the single greatest lesson that I learned about being an entrepreneur was social capital theory. I talk about this all the time. I wrote about this in my first book, but part of building that optionality is having a diverse network of loose ties. And loose ties they're not your best friend. They're not your colleague that you talk to a million times a day. They're the person, at the San Jose campus who you like, and they sort of have put a few things on your plate. It's that person you met at a conference. It's that podcast that you love going on. And so thinking about that network, and also, is it diverse? Are they from different pools? Really thinking about that and treating that network very well while you're employed, I think creates a lot of optionality, both should you want to go get another job or do you want to do your own thing?
Yeah. Yeah. And the diversity of it is such a great point because, if you think about how you can help each other going forward, if you surround yourself too much with people who are exactly like you, that's when it can get a little bit competitive and a little bit, a little bit strange around like, are they going to help me? Or are they going to be worried about me getting in their sandbox? But when you have a diversity of contacts and especially loose ties, if you meet the friend of a friend, that's a great tie because that person is going to feel less pressure to have to help you because they're not your friend, but they're going to feel a certain level of not obligation, but like a desire to help their friend who's your mutual connection, and so that's a really great strategy as well.
Yeah. Talk just for a minute about social proof.
Yeah, so important. So I think going back to the idea that, like I couldn't have been a credible coach starting out really young or, not having done the work before. So I think that's a great lesson that I would share with people is, you probably have a lot of social proof if you've been in the business, for enough time. But I do think it's important to make sure that you have enough, examples that if you're going to go out there as an entrepreneur, that your future customer is able to say, okay, they're kind of a proven commodity and not somebody brand new. I do worry a little bit about like the younger generation now, where I saw this great this great meme where they said, Lord, please grant me the confidence of a 25-year-old life coach. And it's like there's a lot of these younger folks, right, who are like, I'll be a coach. And it's like, you haven't even lived yet,
Yeah, you don't know
but,
anything.
but now with social media, you can get on TikTok, you can build a business. And I'm all for that, by the way, like in terms of building content businesses. And, you can certainly learn a great deal about marketing from like the younger generation using these tools. But depending on the business you're in, like I coach CEOs and senior executives, they need to know that I'm not like right out of school, and I have to have something that's based on business best practices that I've experienced. And so that works for me. But I do think that social proof is critical to really build that brand for yourself, especially when you're starting out.
I 100% agree. And I think for me, social proof doesn't have to be people. It can be being in the media. It can be being on podcasts. It can be having a great LinkedIn page. And what you want is you want to create the sense of credibility in your chosen field. And again, this is something that you can start investing in while you're employed, speaking at conferences, and you don't need a million, couple good links, you're good. But yeah, yeah. So there's a lot that you can be doing if you're thinking that one day I just want options. I might want to go out on my own and investing in that. Um,
Mhm.
as we wrap up, I want to come back to the thing that I think is the biggest factor in should I stay or should I go? And that's money.
Mhm.
And money is so hard because there's the reality of money. We all need it. We need
Yeah.
a lot of it in America. And it's real with our anxiety and our stories around money.
Yeah, it's a huge point. And I would say, in my own experience, it first I had to kind of really level set my expectations around earning money, but also what success looked like to me and my family.
Mhm.
For instance, we didn't have a child when I started my company. And I remember back then, my wife and she was fully supportive. She was working, but she was like, she wasn't in a job that was going to really aspire. She was a teacher, so it wasn't like going to really be a lot of movement up above. Um, and then at the time, we were thinking maybe we won't be able to have children. For me, it was so important to have my business because I just didn't see myself as productive or happy working in a big corporation as like a cog in a wheel. And so this was my dream, and she was supporting me, and we were going to go after it. And then, we did get to reach that point where we were like, we don't want to regret not having tried to have children. And I was fairly doing well, so we went for it. And now we have a 3.5-year-old daughter, which is great. But the truth is that we had to start with that mindset of like, this may not work out,
Mhm.
and I know entrepreneurs that have gone into coaching and then they went back to a big firm because they had to. I think having a little bit of that agility and that mindset to say this doesn't have to be forever is really important to have. And I also think if you can kind of tighten up the straps a little bit on your expenses and things like that, it's really, really going to pay off.
Yeah.
You might have to be a little bit, more structured with your lifestyle and everything like that. But really, if you really want to be independent, it's kind of the price you pay to be able to have that life, that life that you really want.
I so agree. And listeners, actually in my newsletter this week, I included 2 very basic tables that will help you calculate both your expenses and what you need to achieve in basic revenue. Because honestly, so many of us, especially those of us who are a little anxious around money, we don't have a good sense of where our dollars and cents come in and go out. And that is the number one thing you're going to need to look at and know if you decide to leave.
Oh, that's a fantastic tool, Maura. I'm going to definitely check that as well and pass it on. Yeah.
It's just a table.
No, but it's good to talk about.
Well, thank you so much. And listeners, if you have a question you want us to discuss 2 weeks from now, please send them on LinkedIn and come find us on LinkedIn.
Great to see you, Maura.
Thanks
for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it for today. To hear more LinkedIn Lives, head over to my profile on LinkedIn where they're all indexed. You can subscribe to my newsletter too. And be sure to subscribe or follow the Anxious Achiever feed for more of these conversations, as well as my regular podcast episodes.